What is up, you guys? Ryan Brewer back here, the host of Michael Myers Reacts, and today I am here to do ranking podcast number 10. Honestly, it's hard to believe that this is the 10th ranking podcast that I have done. Today I'm going to be ranking George Romero's zombie films. Now, most of you probably already know that there are 6 George Romero zombie films, which is Night of the Living Dead, Dawn of the Dead, Day of the Dead, Land of the Dead, Diary of the Dead, and Survival of the Dead. I am going to be ranking these movies from my least favorite to my favorite, but before we get into that, I do want to say that I am a fan of all 6 of these zombie films. Obviously, there are some better than others, but I do enjoy all 6 for what they are, and of course, we're going to be getting into that. So with that being said, let's go ahead and get right into this. Number 6 on my list has to go to Survival of the Dead from, I believe, 2009. Now, Survival of the Dead is the one that I watched the least. It's the one that I don't enjoy as much as the other ones. Now, I'm not saying it's a bad movie, but it's not great. I think the story was kind of weaker on this film than the other ones. Also, the CGI in this movie was not the best, even though, of course, CGI was still kind of new at that point. Not really. I mean, it was around for a few years, but it still just wasn't that good in this movie. I just felt like it was unnecessary CGI. Like, of course, the earlier Romero zombie films was all practical effects, but majority of the kills and blood in Survival of the Dead was CGI, and I wasn't the biggest fan of that, to be honest. Would I recommend Survival of the Dead to somebody? I would say yes if you're a George Romero fan. If you're kind of just a casual horror fan, maybe not so much of a George Romero fan, and you're just kind of a zombie fan, I would say skip over Survival of the Dead. It's just something that's kind of just there, in my opinion. It's not great and it's not bad. Honestly, if I was going to rate that movie, I'd probably give it like a 5 or a 6. I know that seems pretty low, but it to me, it is just sort of an average zombie movie. So yeah, definitely number 6 is going to go to Survival of the Dead. Number 5 on my list, though, is going to go to Diary of the Dead from 2007. This movie, if I was going to rate it, I'd probably give it a 7.5 to an 8 out of 10. It's a lot more enjoyable. I like the story a lot more than Survival of the Dead. Basically, it's about this guy named Jason Creed who is wanting to be a film director, not so much in movies, but he wants to make documentaries and stuff like that. And obviously there's a zombie outbreak going on, so he kind of has something to document, and he ends up making this film called The Death of Death, which is him documenting all the zombies and whatever he saw. I think the story's a lot better. It's kind of like a found footage zombie movie mixed with just a regular cinematic zombie movie. I really like how that's shot. There's a little bit of CGI used in this movie, but not as much as Survival of the Dead, and I think the CGI was better in this, and it's kind of weird because this was 2007, and Survival was 2009, so you would think Survival would have the better CGI, but no. I would say this one definitely has the better CGI, and I don't think all of it was CGI. There was definitely some practical effects used in this one, so that's another reason why I like this one more. I would definitely recommend Diary of the Dead over Survival, especially to a casual zombie fan. I would definitely say watch Diary over Survival. Again, if you're a George Romero fan, Diary is definitely a must-see. I really do enjoy Diary a lot. It's a movie that I definitely am going to go back to more and more. Survival, not so much, but Diary for sure. Had a lot of fun with it. But number 4 on my list is going to have to go to 2005's Land of the Dead. This is when Romero first came back into making original zombie stories, and honestly, I think it was a great comeback for Romero because Land of the Dead is very, very enjoyable. Now, Land of the Dead is kind of like your typical modern-day Romero zombie movie. If you watched his second trilogy, which is Land, Diary, and Survival, you know that they are more horror comedy than anything. Obviously, there was a little comedy thrown in the original trilogy. There's a lot more comedy in the second trilogy, but honestly, I think it really works in Land better than any of them. Diary didn't have as much comedy as Land, but the comedy in Land was better than any of them. The comedy in Survival, honestly, was very weak and not good at all, to be honest. But the comedy in Land of the Dead definitely worked for me, and it's actually pretty fun. And in Land of the Dead, you got zombies that are actually kind of intelligent. They kind of know what they're doing. I mean, they're still not fully smart, but they know what they're doing. Like, they have a leader, they got guns, they learn how to break stuff. I mean, usually zombies are more stupid than that, but in Land of the Dead, I like the idea of having intelligent zombies. Land of the Dead is really fun. I guess that's the word I would say. I mean, I wouldn't say it's the best zombie movie ever made. It's certainly not the worst zombie movie ever made, but it's a really fun time. Out of the second trilogy that Romero did, this is definitely the best one, and I'm 100% going to go back to it and watch it more and more. So this is where the comment section is probably going to blow up. I'm going to be ranking the original Romero zombie trilogy now, which is Night, Dawn, and Day. And number 3 on my list is going to have to go to Day of the Dead from, I believe, 1985. If I'm wrong, please correct me. Now, don't get me wrong, Day of the Dead is a masterpiece. That whole original trilogy is a masterpiece. Day of the Dead, the whole bunker setting, Bud the zombie is amazing. That whole movie is literally a 10 out of 10, but it's personally not my favorite one. That's why it's number 3 on my list. I think the cast was perfect for Day of the Dead. Tom Savini's makeup effects for Day of the Dead were better than any of the other films, in my opinion. So, I mean, if I was ranking it by effects, I would definitely say this is number 1, because I really do love the effects in Day of the Dead. But Day of the Dead, to me, it's a fun movie, but it's not a movie that I guess you would say I'm a hardcore fan of. I definitely love the movie, don't get me wrong, but it's just kind of, out of the trilogy, it's just the weakest one to me. This one, I would say, is the most horror comedy out of the original trilogy. Maybe that's why it's kind of, low for me. I know a lot of people would put this at like number 1, and honestly, I'm not mad about that. I wouldn't argue about that. It's just, I like my movies a tad more serious, I guess, than like, horror comedy's fine, but I really like my horror movies serious, so that could be why. I don't know why I said it's kind of low on my list. That's actually a good thing, because I'm going from worst to best. I don't know why I said that, but number 3 definitely is going to go to Day of the Dead. Highly recommend it to any zombie fan. Every George Romero fan has seen this movie. If you haven't, you can't really call yourself a George Romero fan, in my opinion. Go watch Day of the Dead. Just go watch Day of the Dead. It's really all I gotta say. So now we are down to the final 2 movies in this ranking, and this is where things are going to get probably really controversial. Number 2 on my list has to go to Night of the Living Dead from 1968, the original. There's not a lot I can say about this movie that hasn't already been said. Night of the Living Dead is a classic, one of the best horror movies ever made, in my opinion. There's an argument right there. I know people's going to be like, oh, what do you mean, what? Night of the Living Dead, definitely one of the best horror movies ever made. I'm pretty sure every horror fan has seen it. Everyone who's listening to this podcast has seen Night of the Living Dead. If you haven't, what are you doing with your life? Go watch it. But I can't say a lot about it. I think Night of the Living Dead, honestly, is a perfect story. One of the most iconic horror movies ever. What can I say about it that hasn't already said? But it's still not my number 1. But like I said, there's not a lot I can say about Night of the Living Dead. If you haven't seen Night of the Living Dead, please go watch it. Like, honestly, I don't know what you're doing. I feel like every horror fan should have that in their collection. Every horror fan should have at least saw the movie. But yeah, it's still not my number 1. People's going to be mad about that. That's fine. Number 1 on my list goes to the last choice, of course, 1978's Dawn of the Dead. A lot of people would agree with this and disagree with this. I love the whole mall setting. I think it's a perfect cast. I think everything about Dawn of the Dead is perfect. I enjoy that movie every time I watch it. Actually, I love it more and more every time I watch it, and it just never gets old. And honestly, I feel like Dawn of the Dead is a perfect introduction to get somebody into zombies. Night of the Living Dead also, I wouldn't say that it's not. I would also include Night of the Living Dead, but if I was going to introduce somebody to zombie films, or just anything zombies in general, I would probably show them Dawn of the Dead. Dawn of the Dead, to me, is a 10 out of 10. It's a perfect movie. Obviously, people could probably pick out the flaws from the movie, but I just think it's perfect. I love everything about the movie. It's enjoyable from start to finish. It always has me on edge. Even though I've seen it, I just love everything that happens in that movie. And Dawn of the Dead it's definitely a perfect horror movie. And it comes from one of the best decades in horror, which is 70s horror. I love 70s horror. Actually, I just love all things horror, of course, you guys know that. But 70s definitely had a lot of great stuff to bring us, and Dawn of the Dead was definitely one of the best 70s horror films ever. Also, I want to make something clear. I'm not here to necessarily review the movies. I'm just here to give you guys my thoughts and my experience with these movies and my ranking of them. That is how I would rank these Romero zombie movies. Honestly, all 6 of them are enjoyable. Survival is definitely the weakest. We know that by now. You guys heard this ranking. But I would definitely recommend watching all of Romero's zombie movies, especially if you're a hardcore zombie fan. And if you're a horror fan and you haven't seen these, I can't stress this enough. Go watch them. They're definitely worth your time. But that is my ranking. I may review these movies in the future. I just wanted to get a ranking out here because I've been watching these movies like crazy recently. I don't know why I've been in like this zombie Romero mood, so I just started watching the movies and I thought, you know what, this would be perfect for ranking podcast 10. It's the 10th one. I got to do something sort of special for it, and I definitely feel like these movies are special. They're obviously, huge for horror, so I had to rank them. So overall, that is my ranking of the Romero zombie films. If you guys did enjoy this ranking, please leave a like and subscribe. That would be much appreciated. Again, let me know in the comment section down below what you guys think of Romero zombie films and just George Romero in general. And I will see you guys very, very soon.